In this insightful conversation, Gigi Tsontos, CEO of Not One More Vet, shares her journey from social work to veterinary mental health advocacy. The conversation covers the unique vulnerabilities of veterinary professionals, the importance of emotional intelligence, systemic support systems, and practical steps for fostering a culture of well-being within the veterinary practices. Today, I am so excited for our guest. I have the honor of introducing Gigi. She is the current CEO of an organization very near and dear to my own heart, which is Not One More Vet. So, Gigi, thank you so much, number one, for being so responsive with me and your willingness to carve out time today to talk to us. I can't help but think a lot of our professional colleagues are going to want to listen to this conversation because of the great work you guys are doing.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. That's such a nice introduction. Happy to be here and honored to be here. Love to speak about NOMV, so thank you so much.
Yes. For listeners that may not know your background, can you walk us through your journey from social work into the vet profession and the work you're doing today?
Absolutely. I love talking about Not One More Vet, so
Yeah.
thank you. I'm a social worker at heart. I went to the University of Kansas and had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be an international business person. You just have these ideas. And a friend mentioned social work to me, and I was like, what is that? So there was an intro class, and I just fell in love. And so I started that and pursued that degree and kind of lived all over the world and did a lot of different things. I grew up in Kansas. My family had a farm, and so animals and vets and people were always around. And I've always loved the veterinary community and then also the helping professions. So I've worked running nonprofits in mental health and well-being, homeless services, etc. throughout the years. And what I really love doing is working within an organization and helping make sure that impact meets the mission and just advancing missions in general. I was very fortunate a couple of years ago. My predecessor had decided to step down here at Not One More Vet, and I wasn't very familiar with the organization, but it kept coming across my desk, and I was like, I really should open this because I don't know what it is. And I was super excited because I've always told my husband that I'd love to mirror my social work experience with animals and veterinary and all of that. And so NAMV's mission is to support veterinary well-being. I was just excited to come in and be a part of this growing world here in vet med to make a difference, right? To show that the profession can support its team members who make it work. And us as pet guardians and supporters and adjacent people to the field can also do that as well. And so I came in a little over 2 years ago, and we've just had a great experience really focusing in at NOMV on what we can do to support veterinary industry from the education side all the way through retirement of any individual or any adjacent parties who work within the field. So that's the skinny on how I got here.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you, veterinary medicine is often described as a profession built on compassion, right? We say that we are full of empaths. From your perspective, what makes it uniquely vulnerable to mental health challenges?
Wow, that's a big question. People ask it all the time, and I think there's so many variables, but I would say you're on par with the empath. Not only being empaths, but also people who relate to veterinary medicine and any part of the industry, from the vet to the tech to the support staff. They love animals. They may not be as comfortable with people. So there you have some differences there, as well as most of them that I meet are not only just highly intelligent, but they want to do everything well and be perfectionists. And so when you have that combination of being very thoughtful about the community and the people you serve and the animals you serve, having less excitement maybe about one part of that, but also wanting to do everything well, it puts a lot of internal pressure on you. Additionally, just to be honest, coming from the outside and looking in, the profession itself has built a culture of creating space that has no boundaries, that really puts an emphasis on doing everything right and working long hours and things like that. And I think that's changing 100%. But depending on the field, so if you're a companion animal vet, that's one thing. If you're a large animal vet, that's another. If you're working in food industry, there's just so many components, but across all the industries, even in zoo. Okay, so recently I spoke at a zoo conference and it was so great to learn more about that industry.
Mhm.
But within all of them, that same thread I see is you're right, they're empaths. They love the creatures they work with. They want to do well. They put a lot of pressure internally, and we've set systems up that put a little extra pressure as well.
Yeah, something, and I'm just curious if you feel aligned with this or maybe even have a difference of opinion. Something that I kind of learned along the way was an evolution into a better understanding of emotional intelligence. And
Mm.
many, many years ago, I believe I was actually developing it, but I didn't know that's what it was called at the time. And then again, it became something more popular, more commonly discussed. And there was some research I had done where it essentially suggested that for those people who are very analytically minded, which is
Hmm.
usually your science and math
Hmm.
type of
Yep.
individuals who, i.e., veterinarians, right? Unless you work on it, you tend to have a lower than average EQ, emotional intelligence, than population sets that are more artistic and feeling, if you will. And so when you kind of combine that along with, I can't tell you how many times I hear about people avoiding conflict and not wanting to
Hmm.
advocate for themselves or
Yeah.
set boundaries and what have you. I almost feel like it compounds what the industry experiences when it comes to mental well-being or lack thereof.
Absolutely. I hadn't thought about it that, and I haven't personally looked at any research in that area. So I can't speak to the emotional intelligence. I do think it's a key to
Sure,
human life, right?
sure.
That's the other thing is I think when we other ourselves, like when we separate ourselves, that can also intensify. But I really like the concept of thinking about our own EQ and enhancing that as part of how we develop as a human, as a
Sure.
vet, as a tech, as a part of the system. And so, when I think about that too, so one of our big programs here at NAMV is called Clear Blueprint. It's a clinic, a workspace assessment and certification program on mental health and well-being. So we can identify the areas where a clinic or a hospital or some adjacent profession, academia, whatever, is lacking or needs improvement in some way on these key areas. And then we help provide education and materials. And some of those are about the whole being, meaning the whole system in which that clinic or space is functioning. And some of it's about the individual and things about how we can increase our emotional intelligence, how we can develop communication tools that help us, how we can ask for help from others. I don't know how many clinics and spaces where I talk to them and they don't have any process for tag teaming. Like,
Yeah.
hey, Bridget, I could really use this client, Gigi. She's a lot. Like, I could really use your help on this and making that a comfortable situation. Or when you make a mistake, because inevitably that's going to happen, right? Making it a shameful thing versus making it something that you talk through and learn from. And so all of that creates an opportunity for trust, for building those relationships and our own and others' emotional intelligence. Because when
Yeah.
we learn how to react differently, and I can tell you, I'm not always great at it. I have tons to work on, but I also know when I've messed up. Let's say if you have a partner, generally that's a person you're going to mess up with at some point,
Sure.
So when I do stay with my spouse, I say, I I immediately know. And that's part of your emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Like, how am I reacting? But
Mhm.
I also don't want to put it all on the individual. So I love the concept of the emotional intelligence and developing that, but I also think it has to be systematic.
Yeah.
Systems need to improve so that people feel comfortable working on that, making mistakes, setting boundaries. I just was writing something this morning about mental health days. So Nambi's team is taking a mental health day later this month, the whole team.
Yeah.
We're just taking the day off to do things, to give ourselves a break. And I was thinking about how crucial that is, for us. And so when I talk about systems, allowing that either as a team or as an
Yeah.
individual, hey, Bridget, I'm having a bad day, just have a lot on my plate.
Yeah.
What are some options that I have that you can walk through? And it might be something like that. So I know I went on a tangent there, but
It's
just
all
one, yeah.
honestly, it's so interesting to me because the genesis of this podcast was leadership.
Right.
But when you think about it, it's so interconnected to literally everything. And you hit the nail on the head, Gigi, when you're talking about, okay, yes, there's the component of emotional intelligence, but beyond the individual, we have to consider the space within which that they're working. And as you're talking, what keeps coming to mind is psychological safety
Yep.
through and through. And that goes back to leadership and
Yep.
the people that are ultimately responsible to protecting and molding the culture of, let's say, the practice. Where is it a psychologically safe space where I can make a mistake and not feel crucified for it? I'll even push it a step further. Many years ago in my own career, you get to know your team. And what I find so ironic, and I joke about this sometimes with some of the hospital teams, we are so precise when it comes to reading animal behavior. The cat flips its ear slightly and you're like, okay, it's about to bite, a little flick of the tail, and we're on it, those cues, the
Mm.
nonverbals.
Yep.
But you have a colleague breaking down, boohoo crying in the middle of treatment, and it's like, move out of the way. I'm trying to get to the catheters. It's like we lose that part of ourselves when it comes to people, which is so ironic because of how well we can read nonverbals of animals. And I think about that, and it's like, as a leader, I do think we have an obligation to recognize when an employee is off, to read the room and recognize they're having a bad day. So I digress. There was a point in my career where I could tell I had an employee struggling, not their normal self. I went up to them, spoke to them privately, and said, listen, why don't you go home? And they were like, what? And I was like, you're not in trouble. Like, this is a shit day for you. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I don't want you to grin and bear it. I want you to go take care of you. And I remember they were shocked, but then after the fact, so thankful that they were allowed the grace to have a really bad day and not have to perform. And I can't help but stress that to any leader that's listening of be there for your people, be a protector. Yes, everyone can't go home every day, but when your people are having a really bad day, right?
100%. Bridget, I love that. I love that story. So I started supervising people right out of graduate school, and I was not ready.
Yeah,
Like just
right.
not, right? And
Sure.
I remember all the way back then and having these days where like I was like, why aren't they just getting their stuff together?
Right.
Right? Like
Yeah.
what is your deal?
Yeah.
But I think you said it, knowing your team and that team building should be part of your vet practice or whatever practice you have. So Nambi works 100% remotely, and building that in can be very challenging because we see each other maybe once a year in person.
Okay.
So those cues that you have are very different,
Yeah.
like we're doing right now on Zoom. I can see you nodding when you're thinking about
Sure.
something that I'm saying or those kinds of things. But I think you're right. I think being a leader who is empathetic but also giving to the team And then the other concept of leadership that I think is super important is leading from all levels. So if you aren't the one as the owner or
Mhm.
the head vet or practice manager that sees this person, letting other people be able to create a path to share with whomever the right person is, how to help that other person. People always ask us at Nambi, what do we do when we see someone who we're worried about? And the best thing and the only two things you have to do, I think, are be non-judgmental and ask them how they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to do it in a certain way. You don't have to say the right thing. You just want to check in
Yeah.
and you don't want to judge.
Yeah.
And those two things make a big difference,
Yeah.
right? So what you did for that person, it created one, a lot of trust between you. Two, they understood that it's okay not to be okay and they weren't alone.
Yeah. They were
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seen. Yeah.
Yes. I agree with you. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah.
especially in vet med. Like we're empaths. We care. We're good
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think, and you raise a good point, that people maybe don't address it or acknowledge what they're observing almost out of fear. Like they're not
Mm,
sure how to say it or they
yep.
think they're going to make it worse. And to your point, acknowledging that you see somebody is not a bad thing. And they will give you the grace of not saying it perfectly, right?
100%. Actually, recently someone asked me, well, what if people don't want to be checked in on? And I was like, that is just human nature.
Yeah.
We want to be felt and
Yeah.
known and seen.
Yeah.
If somebody has a challenging experience and you look back and you say, I didn't check in, that feels a lot worse for you than it does to
Sure.
check in and even have them say, hey, leave me alone. And that's okay too,
That's right.
right? I mean, I certainly have days where I don't want to deal with whatever it is or talk about it or whatever.
Right.
But I think that message of very simply acknowledge or just say, how's it going? I mean, just the simple thing and be genuine about
Yeah.
it. Don't do it because you have to. If you don't feel it, maybe somebody else around you can help, right? I haven't mentioned, I have 5 four-legged animals in my
Hmm.
home, and 2 of them are having medical issues. So I see my veterinary team, their veterinary team all the time,
Yeah.
like all the time.
Yeah.
And I think they know me well enough that they know when they're going to give me some news that may be a little challenging. They know my reaction is to tear up. It's not anger, it's not
Yeah.
frustration, it's just how I cope with that situation. And so I always try to let them know again, it's not you, it's me. But I think for leaders, being that vulnerable and letting someone know for you that it's hard, that
Mhm.
modeling makes a huge difference. So, modeling to your team that you're having a rough day and you could use some extra support. Maybe
Sure.
somebody else needs to do that initial discussion or something, or maybe a team member is very good at those financial conversations and another one just feels super stressed about it. They can learn from one another, but they can also, like I said earlier, tag team. And so anything you can do in those spaces to provide that to the team, I think is going to be key. I was so fortunate. They also allowed me to sit in on a clinic one morning. And by the way, Bridget, I don't have the strength to be a veterinary team member.
No.
I cried 3 times. Like I was
Oh,
like, no,
yeah.
like you guys, you can hold it together very well. But
Yeah.
they even gave me a hug. That's how, because the
Oh,
last thing that happened, I was like, oh gosh, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But
yeah.
my point in saying that is it was so great to look at that team camaraderie and
Hmm.
how they didn't go back and say, hey, Gigi, or this client is such a pain. Even if the client was being what could be considered a pain, they
Hmm.
went back and you could just see that they have that culture of like, we want to honor the people. We get frustrated and we can say things like, I'm feeling frustrated, but we're not blaming. And
Yeah.
that also changes the culture, right? So It's okay for us to be frustrated with something. How we engage in that frustration can also keep us in the lack of moving forward or in
Mhm.
the non-responsive way. Back to that emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
Can, no, Gigi's coming in today. I don't want to see her. She's not like if you start with that, it's going to continue.
Let me ask you, I'm going to throw out some common words or terms
Sure.
that we hear people talk about: burnout, compassion fatigue, moral distress, maybe not even fully understanding what that truly is, but they think that's what they're experiencing or witnessing. In your opinion, how do those experiences show up differently for veterinary teams?
To our initial discussion around the people who are involved in the industry, the people
Yeah.
who gravitate towards this. So scientists are analytical typically. Most of the people are very, very intelligent and have that analytical mind, but also that perfectionism inside of them. In vet med, I think sometimes these things show up in small ways as they start to grow. So if we start to see someone that doesn't seem like they're enjoying, they come to work, even if it's one day and they're like saying different things or just don't seem to be enjoying the work because I guarantee they enjoyed it at one point,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so we see that in vet med a lot where compassion fatigue and burnout are noticeable early because you can sense that they're not excited to be there. I have three Boston Terriers. In the clinic that I go to, everybody knows their names. They all like say hi to them.
Hmm.
That's the kind of clinic that I'm in. If you see your team member that normally would do that and they're not, you can kind of start to see where they're not showing up with the vigor that they
Yeah.
had. And it can be very subtle. So those kinds of things come up in vet med, I think, a lot from what I see. Even when we have conversations with our colleagues that just are outside the norm, meaning maybe they aren't anymore talking about the things that make them happy in life.
Yeah.
Um, those can be like little subtle signs in vet med. And I think also depending on what kind of arena you're in. So I mentioned zoo vets earlier. I mean, that world is so unique, right? Because they're in the spotlight to the world because
Sure.
they're taking care of exotic animals that maybe, and by the way, you all vets, you have to learn so many species. So all of these things, I'm trying to get back to your answer, but I see in these different arenas those things start happening differently. Like maybe when you could see how much love they had for the animal and you're starting to see that change. That's a key indicator because you mentioned veterinary team members are really good at those cues from animals. If you start to see someone who's not feeling that, like you're not seeing that same, that's a key indicator I've seen in all throughout vet med, even some of the food industry veterinarians, when they're more detached from the work, you can see that it's
Yeah.
just changing the way that they see things. But let's see what else. A lot of it, a lot of it's not different than any other human, right? So that's one message we're also trying to get is when we look at ourselves first as a human and how humans interact within the world, we can see the parallels, whether you're a dentist, a vet, a veteran, you can see parallels about how humans react or interact or detach in situations. And so to me, that's the one of the first and foremost things is when someone's whoever they are starts to show up a little differently, have a different attitude, you want to check in as soon as possible. Even if it seems really out of the ordinary, it's just that one day. It's okay if it's that one day. That one day can build. And when you're dealing with micro traumas throughout the day, so things that you vets deal with that the rest of us don't have to. You're making life or death decisions that sometimes are just financial. You're helping individuals make decisions that are some of the hardest decisions of their life. And it's not always for a medical reason. And you are the only profession, at least in the United States, where you can administer lethal drugs
Yeah.
to a living creature. That's a lot. And then you have vets and team members who are in shelters and they're doing the same surgeries over and over and over all day. All of these things add up to
Mhm.
to all of those little pieces of the pie. So I always think check in before you think there's a problem. If someone's just starting to be off, hey, how's it going? Is there anything we can do? And it doesn't have to be something chronic, but the earlier we share support, the earlier we let people know that they're not alone, the better off they're going to be, you're going to be, and the outcomes of the patients are going to be.
Yeah, I agree. As a lot of people know, my PhD dissertation, of course, is focused on this
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
thing, right? And something that just keeps coming up time and again is to some degree the taboo or social stigma to not being okay.
Yeah.
And my hope with today's conversation and future research and future conversations is that we break that barrier down so that people recognize that it's no fault of their own to not be okay. You're a human. You don't have to be functioning at 110% every day. And my hope is that we get to a point in the very near future where not only is there psychological safety, but individuals that maybe are experiencing something of significance are empowered to go to a trusted mentor, friend, spouse, whoever, and say, I'm not okay. And this is what's going on, so that
Love it.
we can kind of continue that dialogue and not feel icky about it.
100%. Our mission literally is that we don't want the industry members to just survive. We want them to thrive. To thrive, you need to be able to also let people know or be okay with not being okay and knowing that you're not alone in that environment. And just for people's information, Nambi has one-on-one currently have counseling, but we have peer support through our VMHS and other programming. And those are free to you. So come use them, please. Like, that's why we're here. The old adage in social work is we want to work ourselves out of a job. But I will tell you, obviously, I haven't been in the industry as long as you have or other people, but since Nambi's come into play in 2014, the research shows that there is an improved arena of discussion and engagement, meaning EAPs are available, programs like Nambi's programs are available, clinics are looking at how they do business as a way to, one, increase business, patient outcomes, and also sustain, right? So speaking of research, we have seen some growth. Now, we don't have all the answers, and I'm looking forward to reading your research because I do know you were kind enough to share some of the info with me. But I think that is key to know. We're in a better place all the time.
Yeah.
The work isn't ending, but we are human, and that just means advancing and learning, and research helps, and also getting support helps, right?
Yes. Yeah. There,
However that works for you. You're right.
I want to say it was the bulk study through Merck that
Mhm.
in their most recent one, maybe it
Mhm.
was last year that they published. And what made me so happy was that there was an increase percent of acceptance for seeking help. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, we're on the right
Yeah.
track. Things are,
Yeah.
like you said, it may be slow, but it is improving.
Absolutely. 100%. And that's exactly one of the studies that I was talking through. And I'm lucky enough to work on a collective well-being group with other people in the industry where we're talking about those things and how do we as an industry look at what is well-being in vet med and align it with what's well-being as a human, but also thinking about those things. And with research like yours and other activities that are out there, leaders and individuals can learn more and see more. I always feel funny saying this, but that hope is there, right? There is hope, there is change. And I think, at least in the US, we see that people in general are more comfortable talking about mental well-being. With that said, that the industry is going that direction as well. People always ask me about some more challenging stats that are out there. And I always say, unfortunately, we don't have good stats on all those challenges. we need to think about prevention, and we need to think about how we put our systems together. And we need to think about as getting students involved in how they care for themselves. I would never want to go through NAVLE. You guys are amazing to have gone through all of that. But you think about that kind of process, and you
Mhm.
think about how we set up the industry. And we want people to have all the knowledge and
Yeah.
be able to know that they have the knowledge to do the work. But we also want to make sure that while they're preparing to come into the field, that they start there thinking about how they want to be in the industry. What kind of place do they want to work in? Is it important to them that that place takes these things that we're talking about today to heart? Is it, what kinds of things are out there? And so leaders can also show that commitment by showing up in these things and having materials from places like NAMV and knowing a bit about the research and things like that.
Yeah, as you're talking, I suppose I don't want to be too presumptive. Naturally, NAMV was immediately on my radar many, many years ago, and an organization that I feel strong alignment with because of how you are kind of breaking those social barriers and making this acceptable to not only have the conversations, but you're providing resources. And to your point, they're free to our colleagues and peers, which I have just the utmost respect for what your group has done. But maybe for those listeners not familiar with what the mission is behind
Sure.
NAMV, would you mind articulating that a little bit more, along with how the organization has evolved over the years?
Absolutely. I love talking about non-bees. So our mission is literally to help the veterinary profession not only survive but thrive. And we do that in three ways. We look at resources, education, and support. We started in 2014 after the unfortunate death by suicide of Dr. Sophia Yen. Dr. Nicole McCarthy said, I just want to have a place where I can chat with my colleagues. And so started a forum, and that forum has grown into over 40,000 people who are in vet med connecting on what's going on for them. So that started NAMV. And then we progressed into becoming an actual 501c3 in 2017. And then in 2020, they hired their first team member, which is my predecessor. And with her help and the support of volunteers, they grew and added peer support programming, a lot of educational components. So when I came on board, we looked at what does NAMV do well and what can we partner on with somebody else who does something well, and where do we want to be? And so we took those three arenas: resources, education, and support, and we said, okay, here's what we do well in those areas, and here's what we're going to do. So today, our programs include resources, which are support grants to individuals in need of basic, simple needs. It's not a lot of money and it's not crisis. You're not getting it the second you ask for it. It's to help you get through a tough time. We have emergency grants to clinics to help them stay open if there's a disaster. We have tons of resources, from how to reach out to a local resource to actual resources that you can download and share and use for your own well-being and skill building and things like that. We have a whole education and outreach arena where we do things like talk to Bridget here on this podcast, but also webinars, and we have a YouTube channel, and we have longer resources that people can access, and we just try to be out there in the community, providing what I say is like synthesized information, because there's lots of
Yeah.
information. So we try to make it user friendly in the moment. So we have that. And our Clear Blueprint, which I mentioned earlier, is a workplace well-being certification program where you do an assessment. And from the team overall, we look at the indicators of where you are, maybe where you could do better, and create plans to do that, and educational materials to continue to develop your workplace culture so
Mhm.
that you can get there and so that individuals can have that support. And then our support is peer support. So we started with Dr. Nicole, and we expanded that to, we have a couple of different peer support programs that are online. And then we also have our veterinary mental health support, which is live sessions. Those are all free. Now, the only thing that we charge a little bit for is our clear blueprint. The backend access costs us a lot of money, so we have to forefront that, but we try to keep those fees very, very low. And we're very excited because we've had academic organizations, we've had more administratively focused but vet focused organizations become clear certified. So we're learning a lot of data about the different types of organizations. Those are our three basic areas, and we plan to continue those going forward. In fact, we're in a strategy sessions with our board and our team members and getting information from others and just learning more about what we do well and how we can partner better with the community. And I would be remiss if I didn't share that in May, which is the US Mental Health Awareness Month, NAMVI is hosting Race Around the World 2026. And that's a great opportunity to get to know NAMVI, whether you're a pet parent, whether you're a leader, whether you have nothing to do with animals, or you're a vet or a tech or anyone. It's a great place to learn about mental health. We just say get moving for mental health during that month and join us to build that community and see how many people. Last year, we had people in 30 countries participate. So we'd love to have you. It's always easy to reach NOMV. We are so easy, nomv.org, easy to get us. So,
and I'll definitely include the links because I can't help but think people are going to be curious and interested, maybe for those that weren't aware of this, valuable resource that's available right at our fingertips.
Absolutely.
Now, with these podcasts, one of my goals is to try to provide some kind of actionable takeaway for, let's say, a leader that might be listening. And I can't help but think a question they may have, if you don't mind helping guide this conversation for those owners or hospital managers, what can they do today to begin building a culture where well-being is treated as a priority versus an afterthought?
Wow. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I think the simplest thing they can do is show up with that attitude. So show up and look at what's going on and do the work for it. For NAMVI, we believe clear blueprint is a very simple key way to help you do that. So it takes very little effort from your team to do this. Everybody in the team has the opportunity to answer a short set of questions that give you this assessment baseline. And then from there, that's one way. You've just shown your team that this is of interest to you and you want to know what's going on. And I will tell you, I talk to clinics all the time and they're like, we thought we were doing really great in XYZ area, but we see we have some growth to do. And that is normal. But I also think lean on other leaders. So, as a CEO, sometimes I feel lonely because I don't have a colleague that's like directly facing me that I can be, as open. And so I think that's another thing you can do to show is to lean on other people, meaning create your community and let your team see that you're creating that community so that you have support, so that you can ask questions, so that you can bring that into your team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. For someone that might be listening who's currently struggling, but hesitant to reach out. And so I don't mean struggling as a leader per se, but I'm saying with their own mental health. Maybe it is burnout, compassion, fatigue, what have you. What would you want them to hear from you today?
You are not alone, and you are not alone. That's the biggest one. Like every human deals with that. There are resources too. And so if you don't feel comfortable with a colleague or a friend, or you want to feel, you want to make sure you're doing something anonymous, we have our programs. We have a fully anonymous program called Lifeboat, which you can get on there. But you can also reach out and just even try a virtual live session with one of our facilitators, completely confidential. Nobody will know you're involved, but also just, the first step to feeling better is understanding what's going on. And that is hard to do alone. So remembering that you're not alone is key to me.
Yeah. Looking to the future, what gives you hope about where the veterinary profession is heading in terms of mental health and overall well-being?
I mean, I think I love that we have data that shows that there's a change. So that's what, but I think the hope is that we have more conversations like this, and that brings awareness, which, and also comfort, right? So when people hear us talking and you sharing that you've been engaged with issues within clinics and things, that's hope to me. Also, hope is that people are receiving our services. To me, it's hopeful that they're reaching out. And I think the other piece of hope is that we are looking at systematic changes within the industry. And that to me is what is going to make the biggest shift
Yeah.
for the individual over time. I'm
Yeah.
also just excited that, we get to be on board and talk about these things in such an open forum now. So all of that brings hope. Yeah.
I could not agree more. Finally, if listeners take one thing away from today's conversation about mental health in veterinary medicine or mental health in general, what do you hope it is?
I guess I have the same answer that you are not alone. You are human. We're all humans. I hope they heard also you and I both sharing that we've had times where things have been unique for us. And so if you can hear that, then you're not alone. The one thing I think is it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to check in with others if you are concerned about them, or even for your own benefit. Sometimes it helps me when I'm down to check in with someone else and say, how are you doing? And really get that. So I know that's not one thing, but I think that you are not alone. I love that Nambi has that in a lot of our resources because it is the truth. And that's
Yeah.
sort of how we got started and how we grew to be here in 2026.
Yeah, I agree. Gigi, thank you so much again for taking the time. I honestly could talk to you for hours, truly. I can't help but think there could be multiple parts to this topic because, again, it's something I think we're both passionate about. For those individuals in the industry in particular that know me and have attended even some of my lectures, I am a survivor of suicide ideation from many, many years ago. And in my own literature, in my dissertation, what I have found, and I want to see more of this, is just as there is a potential contagion effect on individuals that know of somebody that unfortunately took their own life, there is equally a powerful impact on hearing stories of survival. So individuals that were able to work themselves out of either ideations and or a failed attempt. And that's something personally I hope we will be able to present more of in the most respectful way possible, is for individuals to understand what you've said, you're not alone. And my hope is that as a community, we can continue to provide the resources and the pathways for these conversations and impact, but more importantly, remove the shame that I think people feel for having had those experiences or thoughts. And what I think ultimately prevents them from self-seeking support and what have you is I want to just break down these walls so that we can get people the help that they deserve.
100%. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that because it is a hard thing to do. And I think you are right. That message that is hope, right? That is hope. In a very different situation, I remember feeling like just that deep heartache,
Yeah.
that deep heartache. And I feel like if people know that you've felt it, I've felt it, somebody else has felt it, it changes their perspective. It is hope. It is okay to come out the other side. And I'm just so grateful that you're putting this together. And yes, if you ever want to continue the conversation,
Yeah.
myself or somebody else at Nambi would be happy to.
Of course. Well, Gigi, thank you so much for your time today. I truly do appreciate not only you, but your organization and the impact you're having in vet med.
Well, thank you, Bridget. You too. I'm so excited to be here and thankful for the conversation.
Thank you.